I'm trying to imitate Hans Zimmer's score. You can't do it with your mouth. There's way too many crazy, amazing sounds and instruments being played.
A 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Mr. Teach Film Preach, and today we are talking about the film Interstellar. It came out back in 2014. It was one of the films that I was most anticipating, that I was really excited to see, and I already was going into it thinking it was going to probably be one of my favorite films of 2014. And that just wasn't quite the case, but it's still an amazing film, and I'm really excited to talk about it today. This movie was written and directed by Christopher Nolan. Also, who helped write the script was his brother, Jonathan Nolan, who's worked on other films with him, like The Dark Knight, Memento, and a bunch of other ones. Interstellar is a sci-fi fantasy thriller film set in the near future where Earth is desolate from this plague called the Blight, and it's basically like a big dust storm that has really destroyed the crops and the natural resources around the world. So humanity is starving, there's lots of deaths, there's lots of people who are out of businesses, and I really loved how they showed that world at the beginning. And it wasn't like a nuclear holocaust, but it was just because the planet is dying. Cooper, who is the protagonist of this film, he says that man was born here, but we were never meant to die here. You know, we were meant to leave this planet. Cooper, this ex-pilot who's now a farmer, who's trying to keep his farm alive and obviously to survive this blight that is plaguing the entire planet. He's got a son and a daughter. And so this movie basically starts with him being asked by NASA, who he used to fly for, to start working with them on this expedition into space, in between planets, to try and find a new home for humanity, or another Earth, or something that is similar, that where humanity can reset and rebuild a new world. Fly out to Saturn, where they found a wormhole there put by these extraterrestrial beings of some sort, and they don't know who they are or why they put the wormhole there, but it gives them access to travel to another galaxy where there are some potential planets that can sustain life. And so that's basically what this movie is all about. Anytime you have a Christopher Nolan film, he's gonna mess and play with time, because his obsession about time and how that plays into storytelling is very prevalent. And again, this is another example of his obsession and his really great way of storytelling, and being able to tell a story with those different dimensions and different conventions of time and space, and how that plays into the overall story of Interstellar. Christopher Nolan is one of the greatest directors currently working. He just came out with Tenet, and I did a review of Tenet recently. And so watching Tenet made me want to go back and rewatch Interstellar, because I had the similar reaction to Tenet that I did with this film the first time I saw this in theaters, where I liked it, but there was a lot that I was confused about and I wasn't quite sure, and I really wanted to go back and revisit at some point. But it's not a very rewatchable film. You know, it's not one of those movies like The Dark Knight or Inception that is very rewatchable, that you can keep coming back to over and over and over again. This film, very much like Tenet, where I don't know, after 2 or 3 times, if I would go back and rewatch these movies again. And that's how I felt coming out of Interstellar. Not that it wasn't a great film or anything, but that there was a lot of questions I still had on my mind. Christopher Nolan does a great, epic job of writing this film and directing it. He's directed it just beautifully. It is so visceral, and this is probably one of his more human and emotional stories out of all of his other films. And I like that about this movie. So they really needed the right actor to play the character of Cooper, and I think they casted this movie perfectly, brilliantly, getting Matthew McConaughey. Christopher Nolan has such a realistic approach to his films that everything seems so real, but he sets it often in this most expansive and fantasy-filled world where, you know, whether it's Inception, it's inside of dreams, or if it's Prestige and it's set in a world full of magicians, magic. So Interstellar has a really interesting combination of both of those, because you feel like you're really a part of real NASA space travel. You feel like you're a part of the actual expedition yourself. Very real, and it's shot very realistically. It's portrayed very realistically. It's not like Guardians of the Galaxy vehicles and stuff like that, but it's all done in real science. And you can see that all throughout this film, woven into the dialogue where they have to talk about the quantum mechanics and the physics and all the math and stuff they have to determine so they can make their mission successful for certain time periods. If they spend a certain amount of time on one planet, that's like 7 years for 1 hour on that planet. That's like 7 years on Earth. And so they have to take that into account. And so all of that is based in real-time science. Yeah, it's fantasy in some ways, especially with the time travel and near the end with the Tesseract. But everything else seems very visceral and very real, and almost like this could happen. And that's what I love about Christopher Nolan in general. He has these films that are based in reality, and then he expands upon them and expands upon the idea with fantasy tendencies or fantasy elements to his films. And I think that's why he's so creative and such a fun filmmaker to watch. Interstellar really relies on having a great actor play Cooper, and they got the right man for the right job through Matthew McConaughey. He does a great performance, maybe not his best work, but it's up there. It's really well done. You really truly believe his plight and his struggle with, yes, he wants to complete this mission for humanity, but he has this son and daughter back on Earth, and he doesn't know if when he will come back and if he will ever come back. And you really get to see the weight of that film. I mean, the first 45 minutes of this film is all set on Earth. It's just a big setup with having all the rest of the movie later call back to everything in the beginning. And Christopher Nolan does that with all of his films, especially when they're about time. They capture such an amazing performance in Matthew McConaughey for this role of Cooper, because he really anchors us to this movie and to the emotion. And this is why I think this is one of Christopher Nolan's most human films, most relatable films, even though it's really fantastical and out of this world and spacey. But it's at its element, it's about a man and a father who's trying to help humanity and also at the same time struggle with the difficulties of being responsible and loyal to his family. That was one of the best writing parts about this script, was the character of Cooper. The rest of the characters in this movie are great as well. For sure, Murph, who's played by a young Mackenzie Foy, and then Jessica Chastain for the rest of the film. It's really Jessica Chastain who carries this film back on Earth when Cooper is out in space. And so the two of them, Jessica Chastain and Matthew McConaughey, do a fantastic performance. You really feel the father and daughter struggle and love between the two of them, and I'll come back to love later. You really feel the father-daughter love that drives this entire film at its core. That's why, for me, Interstellar is one of Christopher Nolan's, if not his most humanistic and soulful film, compared to a lot of the other films that he's done, where his characters sometimes seem like almost like props that are being used to tell his story. This is very much anchored in the character of Cooper. Anne Hathaway's pretty good in this movie, but you don't really get to know too much about her necessarily, or she doesn't get that much to play with. And she does a good job. She does a good job. The rest of the cast and crew in this film is amazing. I mean, you got Matthew McConaughey, Jessica Chastain, Anne Hathaway, Michael Caine, John Lithgow, Casey Affleck, Matt Damon in a surprising cameo. Oh my gosh, it was awesome. Is Dr. Mann. I think later that year or the next year he came out with The Martian, which is another science fiction astronaut film where he's deserted on a distant planet. This one being Mars, and in this film it's it's a made-up planet. So the cast is amazing and the crew is fantastic. Besides just having Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan at the helm, they also got Hans Zimmer again to score this film. One of Hans Zimmer's best scores in any of this filmography he has. That's up there with True Romance, The Dark Knight. I actually think Interstellar might be better. The organ sounds in this film are just beautiful. Specifically that scene where the ship is taking off and it's just exiting the atmosphere, and then they finally get into outer space and they attach to the spiral. And the monologue is doing, "Do not go quietly into the night, rage against the dying light." That whole poem that Michael Caine echoes throughout the film. When that's going on and the ship attaches to the sphere and it's taken off, and that sound of the organ, brilliant. I watched this quick documentary on Hans Zimmer talking about scoring Interstellar, and he said he wanted something big, epic, and grand. And what's more big, epic, and grand than a massive, like, 1,000 bell organ, and that's what's kind of playing throughout the entirety of this film. The other moment in this film that the music plays really well with the visuals and the action of the story is when, after Dr. Mann, spoiler warning, after Dr. Mann tries to kill Cooper, takes the Endurance and tries to dock onto the station, and then so you can take off and get back to Earth. When that blows up and kills Dr. Mann, and then Cooper tries to fly and do it manually because like the spear is rotating in space, and then he's going to try and dock his ship and connect onto it, and he has to rotate it. And when Anne Hathaway asks him, "What are you doing?" and he says, "We're going to dock this ship," and the music kicks in, look, I even got goosebumps just thinking about it. Oh, it is such a great scene. There's a bunch of moments in this film where I was on the edge of my seat. I had my hands. I was like, no. Like, they do such a great job of building tension, showing tension, and making us feel it. And make you feel like the stakes are extremely high. And they constantly remind you of that. Like, this is humanity's last hope. You're humanity's last chance, blah, blah, blah. And you really feel that weight done through the score, through the visuals, and the drama set throughout this film. The special effects are unbelievable. I mean, they won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. Duh. Like, who else were you going to give it to? This film not only uses as many practical effects as they can, like having, real ships and be in the actual water and not just do CGI for the space scenes, because I never even really noticed the CGI. That's an accomplishment. That's amazing. When you can watch a film and you don't even catch a moment where you're like, oh, that's fake. Everything just seems very real to you. That's an accomplishment. Bravo. Like give that team their praise, because they deserve it. And the space scenes particularly were unbelievable, like where they go through the black hole and the Tesseract at the end, where Matthew McConaughey is flying through and trying to see his daughter and his daughter back on Earth in her bedroom, and try and get her the story and try and tell her the coordinates and get him to stay. That whole scene is just beautifully shot, and actually they built that set. That's not just CGI. They actually built a massive soundstage set to have Matthew McConaughey on a wire and play throughout the Tesseract. That's amazing. This is what I heard when this movie came out, is that they took a microscope and filmed a bunch of like small amoebas and things in a black container, and they put it all under a microscope, and then that's what they put as their space in their scenes when they're traveling throughout space. That's really cool. Instead of just coming up with CGI and digital effects and hiring a team to just kind of make up things, they actually went and filmed real things and then imposed them onto the screen with the actors there. And even the scenes just back on Earth, how they created the world of Earth and how Earth was dying. It was this dust, and it wasn't like a nuclear bombs went off, but it was just like a slow disintegration of Earth and our resources of water and food and crops. One of the things that this movie does really well too is it tells a complete story. It doesn't just leave us hanging. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I like that, because a lot of Christopher Nolan films don't do that. Or a lot of them have a little bit of a cliffhanger, or a lot of them are ambiguous to you on purpose, where this is a beginning, middle, and end. This has a really more of a traditional storyline. Even if the story is told like 20 years ahead of time, then it goes back 10 years, then it goes ahead 51 years, and it kind of jumps all throughout this massive time span. But it's a very simple story of a man trying to save humanity from the brink of destruction. A part of this film I really enjoyed too was the humor. There was actually a lot of great humor in this film, and how the AI, the artificial intelligent robots that they have, TARS and Case, they help them with the mission. And you would think like that's very true. Humans would create AI robots and that would help them on their missions. But it was really funny because they were humorous at times. You could change, like the characters would change the settings of the humor settings, the honesty settings, the irony settings and all that. And it was really awesome. Very surprising how funny at moments this film actually was, especially with the AI robots. It was just a nice little added humor, a nice little peppering on top of the overall meat of this movie Interstellar. One of the things that I felt was a little bit weak about this film was the writing. The film is extremely ambitious and has some really big ideas. I really appreciate and commend Christopher Nolan for always doing that with his films. He's very ambitious with his films, very big idea. And sometimes the writing has a hard time translating that. And don't forget, while he was trying to set this in a very realistic setting, there is a lot of sci-fi fantasy elements to us, or a lot of things that are unknown about this. And it's the last like 20-25 minutes has a really fantastic sci-fi element to it where you're not quite sure what's happening. It took me twice to watch this movie to really understand, oh, that's what's going on. And another thing that this movie really relies on is the unexplained. For a movie that's really about being able to explain things and all the scientific facts and research behind things, they have a really fantastical element about love, about how he displays love, and that love connects us, and it surpasses all the 5 dimensions of reality and time and space and gravity, and that love will conquer all of it. It's a little weak at times, and I felt like it kind of cops out a little bit on that. It kind of relies too heavy on that point of like the love between him and his daughter is what is the actual connection of this entire story. That's great, but it's also not practical, and it's really hard to grasp onto that as audience members, especially in a film that's been so logical this whole time. They just want you all of a sudden to kind of like, you have to give everything up and just give up faith and just put it all in love. And it's a little wishy-washy at times, considering how technical and how precise this film actually is in almost every other regard. And I know the characters pick up on that. Anne Hathaway talks about love being the actual answer, and Cooper not understanding that until the end with his daughter. And seeing that the journey of that is really great, and that part's written. But I think just as a story element, as a writer, as a writing aspect of it, it's a little bit weak, and it kind of cops out on that aspect of, hey, it's just fantastical, and it's science fiction, and love is pretty much like science fiction, and that's just how it is, and enjoy it. I just felt like that was kind of a weaker element that pulled this story back a little bit. Some of the pacing of this film too is a little bit jagged and a little jarring at times. Like, you go at times, like, I kept remembering and kept having to remind myself this is a story about a man who's trying to get back to his daughter and his family back on Earth, and should also try and save Earth, because we take these detours of like going to these different planets and then having this whole 45 minutes with Dr. Man on his planet, and you know that that's not going to be the answer, it's not going to go well. So like, just the structure of it, it was expected and a little bit dry at parts. My last part that I didn't really like, which was the ending of this film. I love that Cooper wakes up and he's on Cooper Station, and it's not actually towards Cooper, but it's his daughter Murph, who was the real answer all along to save humanity. It wasn't Cooper, but it was Cooper to get the information to Murph, so then she could figure out the equation of gravity and mass transport and people through space and time, and get humanity off of Earth. It was Murph the whole time that was the most important, not Cooper. And I loved that. But it was almost, at the end, it was almost neatly wrapped up with a bow, maybe a bit too much. The last like 5-6 minutes of this film was unnecessary. There was a certain moment that I thought they should have just cut the movie there, and they didn't need the whole thing with showing Brand on the planet. I actually would have really liked it a lot more if we didn't know what happened to her and it was just kind of ambiguous and left at the end, and Cooper was still going to go find her, but we never saw her. After he leaves her and he goes into the black hole, into the Tesseract, we never see Anne Hathaway again. And it's up to Cooper to go find her. And I just felt like all the things with her actually being on Edmund's planet and finding Edmund's gravesite and setting up the tent and stuff, it was all kind of just like, here you go, perfect ending. It was unnecessary. Besides that, this film is awesome. This film is almost a masterpiece. It's very close. It's just got such brilliant visuals. It's wonderfully directed, beautifully acted. The visual effects are astonishing. You need to go see this in in theaters. If you get the chance that it comes out again and gets re-released in theaters, go check it out. It is worth it on the big screen. And it has a great overall story. It's very hopeful and uplifting, considering all the content of the majority of this film is very dark, bleak, and tragic in a lot of ways. This film has a little bit of a happier and uplifting ending. So besides those things, this movie's really great. I think you guys will have an awesome time if you watch it. If you like Christopher Nolan, this is another film I'm sure you'll love as well. He doesn't really make bad movies, so we're really playing within the realms of like A minus, A plus, B, nothing less than a B plus. I don't think any of his films really have a lower rating than a B plus. We're nitpicking here for these films. So I'm gonna go ahead and overall give Interstellar an A minus. Awesome film. I really enjoyed it, but it just wasn't quite up to par with maybe a couple of his other films that I like a lot more. But this is not for sure the lesser of his work. Really still enjoyed Interstellar, and you guys will too. If you like this video, click down below, like, subscribe, comment. Have you guys seen this film, and did you understand it the first time? Hopefully you did a lot better than I did, because my head was hurting when I walked out of the theater. Appreciate you guys coming back and checking out all the videos here on Mr. Teach Film Preach. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, let's get taught.